Welcome to the NiFe Show, where we dissect the human psyche and society. And I'm Joyce Meg.
INFJ.
INFJ.
And I'm Denzel Mensa. I'm an ENFJ. Today we're going to be talking about oversharing versus being vulnerable / intimate. So I think that this is going to be an interesting topic, especially for NFJs that are watching and us being NFJs that are, engaging on this, because I think that NFJs more than anything want intimacy. And I know that at least that's the case for Joyce and I. That being said, though, I think that there are ways in where people, not just NFJs, but people in general, may try to create and foster intimacy and almost force it, maybe not even foster, but force intimacy by oversharing. And then, of course, the opposite is hindering intimacy by undersharing, by not showing up, by not sharing yourself at all. And today I wanted to explore where that line could be versus, okay, how do you know when you're probably oversharing and pushing too hard for something that's just not going to grow or will grow, but needs to take a little bit more time versus when you are sharing just enough versus when you are not sharing enough at all, which is also a problem that I think that NFJs can run into. When I did a video one time on nuanced nudity, but we will get to that soon. So, Joyce, you know how this goes at this point. I want to invite you to share your original thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm here to share those right now. Now, when it comes to intimacy, it's an extremely important topic to me because it's one of the things that gives life vividness. With FE working with SE, oftentimes, to create that kind of visceral SE in the moment experience, it also comes with an FE connection and bonding with an individual too. And so I find as an FJ, I really like the feeling of feeling fully connected with a person, and especially with the sexual instinct in the Enneagram, it amplifies that need for this bond that can be very solid. And so oftentimes I want my relationships to work out. And so I will do actions which ensure that. And I don't want it to just be a generic relationship, whereas I can fall into the trap of that because if I get too FE generic sometimes, I will appear really socially polite and know the right things to say, but I'll always sometimes redirect the conversation to the other person. So I'm deflecting it from sharing about myself, and I remain an enigma, a mystery. And I don't realize how little people know about me until they always tell me that, which is, I literally know nothing about you. And I'm like, I just never got to that point, I guess. So that has been a struggle. This desire to have intimate bonds, yet also this protective wall that I naturally have up as an IJ. So Personality Hacker talks about the fixation of IJs is invulnerability. And I don't realize how big of an issue this can be sometimes until people start commenting about it to me. Like, I just talked to a friend yesterday, and they were telling me about their image of how they saw me. And I was really surprised by it because it doesn't really sound like me. And it's not because I meant to hide anything. It's just I'm naturally private and reserved. And so I don't know how little I'm sharing. And so I oftentimes say that I'm an open book as long as you ask me the right questions, because I don't really have a reason not to share it. It's just, it's not my inclination to give information unless it's a part of the conversation topic at the moment. I'm just naturally withholding, not because I mean to be that way, but it just happens to be that way because everything stays in my internal world until someone gives me the incentive to actually tell them. And so I've been trying to be less of this passive role in my relationships and more taking an initiative role. So I actively share instead of accidentally withholding, because that is my natural tendency and I can fall into that so easily. But I realize I can't get the intimacy that I need and want and crave and need to sustain myself when I also have wall one, wall two, wall three, wall four blocking that. And so oversharing has never been an issue of mine because I can be that kind of reserved and quiet being, but I can be overly wanting to help another person. So sometimes when I see someone else needs more attention than me, it's very easy for me to pivot the attention from me onto the other person. And so I just end up focusing on the other person rather than myself. And so that can create a lack of boundary. They call it sucker syndrome. And I can have that sometimes. So that's when I lack boundaries. But I also have too many boundaries when it comes to I deeply crave a relationship where I can experience the abstract core of a person to see the concept of who they are. Yet I don't create opportunities for myself where I can have that as much as I'd want to. And I'm realizing this in my 20s now. And with the realization that I'm going to die one day, it's a really good incentive that I be more proactive in my relationships, to actively take down my walls so that I can form the bonds I want. I was talking before with another person, and they were talking about how, sometimes I think that my relationships are one-sided because I have trouble receiving love. And so you're always going to feel like you're having one-sided relationships if you just cannot take in the love the other person is giving you. If you are a plant and you try to receive certain nutrients, but your roots are just not suited to absorb them, you're going to feel like your environment is deficient. But that's not because your environment has a problem. It's because the plant itself is having some sort of problem absorbing the nutrients. And I fear sometimes that that is me, that the reason why I think that my relationships are one-sided is because I can't receive the love that I want because of trauma in the past. Yeah. So that was a talk I had with an INTJ, and she brought up that point, and it was really, really, yeah, true.
Wow. Wow. That's Thanks for sharing all of that. A lot of it I very heavily relate to, like you. I am I like to tell people, I mean, not just like to tell them, it's what I perceive to be true. That every single waking moment of the day, if it were up to me, I'd like to spend it being intimate, essentially exploring the mind of another person or people, having quality conversations, everything having to do with substance, sharing myself and them sharing themselves, and us trusting, creating a space where nobody fears or has like inhibitions of being laughed at, of being judged, mocked, anything of that nature. And it's just a really like free space, which, I feel like, I would like to think at least that it's like a very like it's where Fe and Ti meet, because Fe can sometimes be too much of, oh yes, let's just all have like a very harmonious environment, but that means that you guys aren't allowed to say certain things. And then Ti could be on the opposite, where it's like, no, we can all say whatever the heck that we want, even if it hurts people's feelings and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, but when you integrate them and you fuse them, then I think that you get a very healthy space where it's like everyone's very respectful of each other and they're very kind to one another. But because of this, because we all have the intention, because we all have the notion that nobody's intending to hurt the other person, then we have the freedom to be able to speak just what we think, because there's no reason to be offended if the person's not intending to hurt you. At least that's how I view things. So if you know that, like even with my relationship with me and my wife, um, I think that's like the basis of our foundation. I know that 99.99999% of the time, Jamila is not trying to hurt me. And so therefore, whatever she might say, I should not be offended by it. And in the same sense, same for me toward her. And I try to extend this with my friendships as well. Like, as long as a person's not trying to hurt me and they hopefully know that I'm not trying to hurt them, this is a free space to speak. And if we all have good intentions, then why should we judge? Rather, let's, okay, oh, that's how you feel about this. Well, I actually feel this way. Let's talk about why. And even if we come to a disagreement, at least we were able to exchange perspectives on it. And I still respect you as a human being. I still love you, that kind of thing. And I feel like that's intimacy to an extent. And I love to engage in that. So, all of that being said, I feel like my natural inclination is to offer up information. I try to take lead in intimacy. I think that I'm more like, if Joyce said that you were a more passive, you lean more on the passive side of it. Like, I lean on more on the active side of it, and I'm trying to learn, I guess, a little bit to be more passive, because I've been much of like a hunter for that intimacy, for that connection, and constantly like seeking out, like, okay, who is my tribe? Who are the people that I want to intimately engage with? And how can I start that and spark that, even if they haven't expressed that interest in it yet? How can I seduce them into my magnetic field? How can I create and foster this relationship to be everything that both of us ever wanted, in a way? And that's just like something that's always constantly on my mind. And then once I'm in it, then I'm always constantly thinking, okay, how can we grow this relationship? How can we foster this relationship? And so every like moment, like when we have it, it's like, like, once again, like using my wife as an example, like whenever we have like free moments, then I'm just instantly thinking, okay, we're driving in the car. How can I use this time to better understand her? How can I use this time to better get to know her? What are some things about me that I can help her better understand about me? Let's find ways all the time to know each other so well that it's like refused in a way, and that to me is just very exceptional. Like, you are incredibly interesting to me, so I want to understand you deeper. I want to continue to keep up with you as you grow and understand yourself, and whatever you learn more about yourself, I want you to share with me. And then I extend that to my intimates, the category like right below my wife, like the people who I see as like my dearest and closest friends and companions, to the point where uh, it might even be the way that the average person would treat their significant other in a fashion. So I'm always on the prowl in that way, but I can definitely see how, in having that more active role, how that could also be, it could sometimes come off strong. It could sometimes come off forceful. Uh, and that's something that I've had to make sure to temper. It could sometimes come off rushed, because if you're looking for every opportunity to increase and grow the dynamic, to me, it could just be like, yeah, no, like, why should we waste time? Like, let's like, we're sitting here in silence right now or whatever. Like, let's use this to try to like foster something. But maybe sometimes that time to breathe and just be is necessary. And that's something that I'm continuing to still learn in my friendships. I've had a friendship one time where things became like very, I guess, a sex instinct, if you will. Like, they just, oh my gosh, like, yeah, you're the greatest, blah, blah, blah. And like, I went with it. Like, we were vibing. It was really nice, whatever. And then all of a sudden, like, that friend was like just quickly put the brakes on stuff. So, hold up, this is actually going really, really fast, which I was aware of. But number one, I enjoyed it. And number two, I always saw things as like, yes, since it's going really fast, I have the ability also to be able to keep in mind that there needs to be substance here, to hold things together, not just the, oh, you're the best, blah, blah, blah. Like, because that's, as quickly as it's constructed, as quickly as it could probably be obliterated. And I would not like for that to happen. So Yeah, I feel like that's something that I've been continuing to learn. And like when that friend actually said that, like, yeah, this is going like really fast, like very rapid, then we ended up having to take a friendship break. I think that was like my first time ever having to do that. Like, but yeah, the friend like called it. And I was like, I felt just really, I was like hard on myself, but that really like taught me a lot. And then when we came back, then they revealed that they thought that, I might have had like some type of malicious intent or something, that they just couldn't figure out. Like, why are you, building this so quickly? And they had their own trauma, like, people who would do that, almost like love bombing, a term that I learned in the past couple of months, where you get somebody to love you so much, and then all of a sudden you just strip it away, like you ghost or something like that. And I was like, no, that was so far from what I was trying to do. I was just so excited that we were connecting in this way. And I can see why you believed what you believed. Um, and I did come off like strong, but it was mainly because I just don't believe, I guess, in like wasting time when it comes to intimacy. And maybe it's not necessarily a waste of time. Like I said, like I've been learning now more like just rest in that. It's all right if there's moments where things are just stagnant. Um, don't stay in the stagnant, but allow yourself to have that time to just let it breathe, marinate, manifest. Um, and that's something that, yeah, I've been continuously trying to learn, so that I don't come off too strong or as if I'm rushing things. And I always was respectful still of like, hey, if somebody didn't want to share something, that's cool. But now when it comes to the oversharing, maybe like I would probably think of something like, okay, well, let's see how I could bring this into the conversation so that way it could open up for that person.
I want to talk a little bit about possibly like the most offensive thing someone could say to me, and it's when they threaten the relationship. So typically I don't take things to offense because I tend to assume other people have the best intentions, just
Mhm.
because I always assume that I have the best intentions, and
Right.
so I project that onto other people until they prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And so I find my biggest pet peeve is when people, they're angry at you or upset at you, or they want to threaten you in some way, and they threaten the relationship. They're like, oh right, if you're like that, well, I don't want to, you know, some extroverted feeling users, they talk about their relationships like it's a third baby. And when
Mhm.
someone threatens that baby and they're like, I'm going to throw it away, I'm going to put it into the trash, the
Oh
dumpster,
yeah.
that is the worst.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like, uh, they don't even think twice, and then they just threaten, you know what, I don't even want to be in this relationship if this is the thing. And I'm like, it's a minor issue, like over this tiny little thing you threaten the entirety of our bond together, the thing that I've been trying to build so much. That is the most offensive thing that has ever happened. And so I
Mhm.
tend to be a pretty chill person because I understand that people say things that they don't always mean, but when they start to say things about how little they invest or want to care for the relationship, or that they want to throw it away at a moment's notice, like a level of fickleness towards our bond or threatening our bond, that I cannot stand. I start
Mhm.
to get resentful at that point,
Mhm.
because I throw all of my firewood into that relationship just to see the other person holding a hissy fit at some random moment of time and then saying something they don't mean about how the third thing that we're creating means absolutely nothing. It
Oh,
is hurtful,
yeah,
hurtful
it's just
beyond
getting
any.
to the face.
It is. And you talked a little bit about, wanting to generate intimacy at every waking moment, and I
Mhm.
I relate to that. That's something I've always aspired to have. I think the passive role I take is just this, I wonder if it's introversion just in general, because I do care as much. It's just I'm a clam. I am a human clam, and I realize that, and I wonder if it's because of trauma. It just makes it hard to know when love's given to me. And then when I realize that love's given to me, it's too late. And then I realize that I haven't reciprocated enough, and that I've been cold for many, many years,
Mm,
and it leaves the other person no choice but to have to leave.
yeah.
And so that's tough. So I've realized that vulnerability, if you have troubles with giving vulnerability, that's a sign that you might be traumatized, because it's a normal human thing to want to bond with people. And if you've had attachment issues, that is because if you haven't had love modeled to you in your life in a healthy way, it can be hard to know how to recognize and spot it. It's kind of sad. Um, I I've had people tell me in my life that they have tried really hard to love me, and that I'm picky. And so the issue is it can sometimes make people feel unloved.
Mhm.
And I've been trying to fix that. And so I'm saying that if you want healthy, loving relationships, you can't always be a clam. You have to open yourself up so people can enjoy your pearl. Otherwise, you're just a lot more work than the other person can give. And sometimes you traumatize people who want to make you open up because they try again and again, and all they're faced with is a wall and another wall. That hurts people from the ground up. And I've had really, really loving relationships in my life. I had an ENFP ex-best friend, and she would try so hard to bring down my walls because she's a person, when she loves you, she has zero walls immediately. And so she ENFP just charges into the relationship. And uh, the lack of walls so quickly was very abrupt. And I guess on some level, I didn't know how I earned it. I'm like, why am I so special to you? I don't get it. It's almost like sometimes I need to know the why to disarm me. Otherwise, I feel like this random thing is happening to me and I don't know what's happening.
Mm.
And I realized that now I'm more open to love because I don't want to let go of possible friends who loved me as much as the ENFP loved me. Like, the things she would say to me are things you would hear people say to each other on their wedding night, but it's not
Mm.
like it meant to sound like that. It's just that some of my relationships sound like vows, which is like friend vows.
Oh,
so,
wow.
so
Okay. Got it. Got it.
yeah, yeah. And the like my ENFP would say things like, when we would fight, it would be, no one is ever going to love you as much as I love you. But that
Mhm.
sounds like a threat and manipulative, right? But what it actually means from her perspective is, I love you more than any human being could ever love anyone. So I'm confident that I love you more than any person in this world. And when she would fight with her boyfriend, she would say, why can't you be more like Joyce?
Oh,
And there were times where we would go to bed and she would say things like, in the past life, um, I think that we were married or something, and stuff like that, or stuff like, if you were in any room, I would have noticed you. So when we
mm,
first met, like it wouldn't matter where I met you, I would have noticed you. And
yes.
so romantic shit like that. Sorry, it would just be commonplace, and it's not because she's trying to schmooze me, because she doesn't have a reason. We're not like dating or anything, but our friendship was as strong as a romantic relationship. I think
Mm,
she loved me more than a lot of romantic couples kind of love each other, and
probably.
I let it pass because it hurt so much that she loved me so much, but I had difficulty receiving love, so it never
Mm,
felt like she loved me, and it just created problems. And so that closed offness that I'm trying to describe is something I've been trying to heal, because I realized that it comes from family trauma, that I feel like I have poor taste in people sometimes
mm,
because I like obvious signs of love, which is why I like words of affirmation, because it's obvious and undeniable. At some point, my ENFP would call me sadistic because I would try to force a direct, loving phrase from her, but from situations where I would kind of take it in a, I would try to drag it out of her sometimes. And she was like, it's sadistic because you should already know what I feel, and trying to drag it out even more because you desire that intimacy of of hearing it. is very painful. And so we had this really real relationship. I'm not saying this is an INFJ thing. I'm saying this is a Joy specific thing, and I'm just sharing it because I want people to know more about me. And if I hide all details about myself, then I'm going to die when I'm 80 and no one will know anything about me. So this is all fear-based. If I'm sharing, it's because I'm thinking about the end of my life and how I want you to know something before I hit the whatever I hit.
We're all soaking it in. You go, girl. But I feel that. It's funny because I said literally just about an hour ago, I said the same thing to Jamila. Like, she was on a break from work, and I told her like just straight up, like, and I've told her this like several times, like, I love you more than anybody else on this planet, kind of thing. And then I specified, of course, I was like, it's not to say that your siblings don't love you like exponentially and your parents and all of the other people. It's just that even though I know that they love you like an incalculable amount and they'd kill for you, like, I just know how much I love you. And I just have confidence that it still surpasses them. Not that it's a competition either, but if anything, the because I could see how that could also seem like toxic in a way, like nobody's gonna love you like how I love you, kind of thing. That's not the intention. And I tried to make that clear. Like that's not that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to like threaten in that way. I'm not trying to even belittle other people's love. It's not. It's less about other people's and more just about expressing and emphasizing just how deeply how I love you, kind of thing. So I could see how it could go both ways, and that's a tricky spot. But yeah, so I thought that was like interesting that you just brought that up when I just said that to Jamila. But also, I feel like that's a really rich intimacy to have, and it made me start thinking about that quote that many people say that you can't expect or you can't be loved until you learn to love yourself. And there's always like some like even me, I'd like think about that and I'm like, is that really true? Like I feel like, especially as an ENFJ, I feel like I've loved mostly a lot of people who don't love themselves. So it's like, what? No, like obviously that's false. Like you can definitely not love yourself and still be heavily and dearly loved. I feel like that happens a lot. But now I think that from hearing your story, and seeing that you said that she's your ex best friend, perhaps it's more about you can't properly receive love until you learn to love yourself. And that I think I can definitely agree with. Like, there's people that it's like, I know that I love you very dearly, but I can't do this anymore because when I try to express love to, like, for me, one of my biggest insults, probably the biggest insult, is when somebody believes that I'm being insincere or misreads my intentions. You spoke about words of affirmation. I know that a lot of people talk about like how words are cheap, and obviously those are people who have experienced people. I've experienced these types of people who will say that I love you, we're the best, blah blah blah, and then they forget about you like 2 weeks later. And imagine being a nine. It's like, oh great, another person who forgot about me, kind of thing. Like, I don't see myself as a type of out of sight, out of mind person at all. Like, and so that was something that's very big for me. But that being said, my words are not cheap. If I'm telling you that I love you, if I'm telling you, if I'm complimenting you, if I'm telling you whatever, I spend so much time, effort, and thought in how pedantic that I am with whatever that I say. And so if somebody cheapens it, if somebody says, oh, well, you might just say that to everyone, or like, you don't really mean it, that you can see me rapidly get pissed off. Like, do you really think that I'm just riding an emotion? I'm just saying something just to say it, just to make you smile? Absolutely not. I mean exactly what I'm saying. Don't cheapen my words. Like that's something that could really piss me off, because it's like that pearl that you spoke of, a pearl for me could be exactly that. Like um I've curated this word this phrase, whatever, this statement, for the person. Even small things like, I avoid saying stuff like "you are my absolute best friend" or favorite friend or whatever, unless if that person really just naturally is. Just got a package. But yeah. So that being said, if I say something and I use a specific word, then boom, like that's just what it is. This goes down to the idea of what I was talking about with nuanced nudity as well. So long story short, I made a video based off of Carolyn Zaikowski's video, where she was talking about what we call the ENFJ pivot. And she said that there's this thing that ENFJs do where they're always encouraging people to share about themselves and to, expose themselves and to metaphorically take off their clothes and everything. But then if somebody asks them to share themselves in the same way on the spot and without any premeditation and all of that, but just be vulnerable in that way, you'll see the ENFJ do this very clever, smooth pivot where somehow they might say something, but it won't really like meet the criteria, or it'll just meet the criteria, and then somehow everything has now been placed back on everyone else. The attention is placed back on everyone else. And she was saying how like she feels like other people don't notice it, but INFJs notice when ENFJs do it. I watched the video years ago and I was like, yeah, that's actually probably very true. Like I know that I do that with myself, and I noticed that I do that. Or I did that. I now don't do that as much, especially having become aware of it, because I want, kind of like with you, I want to be even more active with the possibilities of fostering intimacy. So that being said, I did make a response video called Nuanced Nudity on my page. And the reason why I called it Nuanced Nudity was essentially what I was saying was that when ENFJs, and I can't speak for all ENFJs because I'm sure that there are judgmental ENFJs out there, but at least generally speaking, I'd say, I, and speaking for myself, I know that metaphorically speaking, people can take off as much of their clothes as they like and show their raw, vulnerable selves, and I will not judge it. I will not, shame them. I will not make them feel, too skinny, too fat, anything like that. Once again, metaphorically speaking. But I can't trust that from other people. I can't trust that. So that's why I would assume that ENFJs are often encouraging other people to do it first, in a way. Um, and that is unfair, but it's more like I know that I can do it. I know that if we're going skinny dipping, I know I right now I can take off everything easily. The thing is, if I do it, will you do it? That's what I'm not so certain of. So that's why I need to get you to do it first. I know I'll put down my gun, but I need to wait to see if you're going to actually put down your gun. I can trust myself, but you don't even know if you'd be able to do it, even if I put mine down. So I don't really know if I can trust you then with this. The people who are only allowed to see my metaphorical naked body are those who are going to also show theirs, you know? And if you're not going to, then I don't want to show you mine either. Um, I think that from that being said, I've learned to take initiative in the sense that now, I might show a shoulder first. And it's a strip tease, metaphorically speaking, once again, where now we are sharing these things. And, slowly the ENFJ, or me in this case, I'm taking initiative, but I'm trying to do well between, like, if, going back to the metaphor of like sex, sure there's passion where it's like both people are just rushedly, like just ripping off each other's clothes and stuff like that. But then there's also a beauty to slowly just like really watching the person and like taking turns, like taking off one thing at a time and stuff of that nature, and really soaking in that moment and letting the passion like slowly simmer and build like a crock pot in a way until you get like a really delicious meal. Um, and I feel like there's a beauty in both of that. There's a time for it, and that's what I've been trying to also uh, um, trying to temper, to understand when it's okay to do what. Um, and so there's like in that video is when I coined the phrase like the same naked body that can arouse certain people is also the same naked body that can unfortunately disgust certain people. I don't want to show my metaphorical naked body to people that are going to be disgusted. Ugh, where did you get that scar? Ugh, like what's this? Yo, you're too fat. Yo, you're too. No, I want to show it to the people that are going to be like, wow, you have a scar. Touch it. How'd you get that? I have one too. Whoa, where'd you get that? Wow, that's beautiful though. Like that's part of what makes you you. And we start sharing like that. And from there we continue to strip off more and more clothes. And now we're just completely naked with each other, but we're comfortable and we're free. And it's no release your inhibitions. Feel the rain on your skin. No one else, anyway. But yeah, I feel like that's the ideal for me. Always has been. And I see a lot of people say stuff like this. Like this is what I want, this is what I want. But then you don't see them give that to other people. And that's why, at least in my opinion, that an ENFJ would do the ENFJ pivot that Carolyn Zaikowski talks about, which I'll put that link to the video in the description below for those of y'all who are watching and are interested. She said a lot of like interesting things in there, and she has pretty good videos. They're old, but yeah, they're pretty dope. But yeah, I feel like that's a big reason as to why like ENFJs can come off more withholding, but they want to share more. Whereas like I think for INFJs such as you, Joyce, what I've noticed, because I agree with what the friend said yesterday to you. Or at least I told you that previously. I don't think that you're as much like that, at least with me anymore. But I do remember like, Joyce is very kind and everything, but she's not showing up. And that's also like a 9 thing, like you fuse so much, you merge so much because it's easier to merge when you don't bring as much of yourself into the dynamic. And but then that's not intimacy, that's not true intimacy. In order to have true intimacy, you bring your full self. But I think that it wasn't that you didn't want to with people. Maybe I think at times INFJs just might not know how to. There are INFJs who might know how to, but they're super private in the sense that they're just afraid and everything. And so they just refuse. And so they're just going to be like, no, I just have to watch for 10 more years before I start to share. And it's like, well, by 10 years, that person might not be around anymore to wait that long. It's like, well, then that means that they just weren't worth it. Okay. All right. If you say so. But then there are also those that I've run into, which I think leans more with you, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, where it's like, no, I want to be intimate. I want to share, but I don't even know how. Like even sometimes in our conversations, like in the past, I'd noticed like I'd see like you want to, but then it's like you don't even know like where to start, what topic to bring up, stuff like that. So then it's like, oh, and then I'd kind of like inch things like, hey, let's talk about this. What do you think about that? And so then I'd kind of like guide it in that way. But because I know that we're both on the same page, then it's like, all right, I feel more than comfortable guiding here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my thoughts there.
A lot of intimacy for me has been learning what I've been taking for granted, because I am a person who naturally entices people to be assertive and aggressive with trying to get to know me. So I don't have to make the first move because I typically have other people making the first move too. And I realized that, with the ENFP ex-best friend I talked about, you never really know that you the power of happiness until you know what sadness is, or you don't know what light is until you know what darkness is. You take the other for granted until you know how the the differing perspective feels. And so me and the ENFP, we were known as the inseparable package. You don't refer to the ENFP as just herself. You don't refer to Joyce as just herself. You always say when you refer to us, it's the ENFP and Joyce. And that's always been throughout our life. And it was because she was kind of like sticky rice, like sticking to me. And she was like, you know what? If I had not met you, I would have not wanted any sort of SX bond with anyone. But for her, it was just because it's you. It's that I was her only thing that made her want to commit to something, because she's very freedom loving, or she likes to get to know a wide variety of people. She's not a person like she understands people quickly, and then she kind of moves on after getting the gist of who they are. But so she said that there's countless people that I could label, describe, but you leave me speechless. And I never truly understood the irreplaceability of that connection until it was gone, because I'd taken it for granted. And when you take something for granted for too long, there's a chance that it'll leave you. Um, it's just it's been so hard to understand just the depth of how much she loved me. It was very hard to fathom, and so I couldn't at that time receive it. She would write me letters about how. Remember that time when we got angry? She would write, and it was like when this is hard for me to share, but I'm trying to be vulnerable and not try to be Joyce. And so she wrote to me about how we had a huge argument about, she said, you're irreplaceable to me. And I just was like, huh, is that like a human thing? Can people actually be irreplaceable to others? So I took it in a philosophical bent. I'm like, can human beings really view each other as irreplaceable, is what I asked. And she saw it as questioning her loyalty and love for me. She got really angry. She is not quick to anger unless she's defending someone else or at that specific type of thing. She was belligerently angry that day at me, and I had no idea why. And I wondered if it could be just me not understanding love, an FE clash. But she wrote to me about how, remember when I got so angry at you when I said that you're irreplaceable, and you said that it was a lie? And that bothered me so much, because the moment that I had met you, I had decided to carve into my mind that you were irreplaceable to me. It hurt because it was so true. And so there, yeah, like she wrote me letters about how I was her soulmate. And at the time I didn't understand, like, how can you love someone so much and not have it be delusional, is what I thought to myself. When I want love, like I want a true form of love, I guess I just couldn't believe in love enough to accept, okay, no, that's real love. I just was not able at that point in my life to fully receive that, because it was mind-boggling how someone could feel so intensely towards you and have it be real, and not have them in, I don't know how to explain it. For me, I'm like, is this just a passing feeling that you feel, or is it like something you feel all the time? And so out of my disbelief, when you keep shutting down something over and over again, you ruin it. And so, yeah, I hurt a lot of people basically. And so with I've been having a lot of regret and grief these past few months, because I am now just fully understanding how much I've been taking her for granted. And her door is always open for me. So she said, whenever you need me, even though we're no longer talking, we're on our distinct paths in life. But she said, if you ever need me, I'm there for you. And I've been trying to repair broken bonds and take future bonds more seriously because of that experience.
That's beautiful, Joyce. So I have a feeling that there are a lot of people who are watching this either today, well, the day that this video drops, or maybe even like a couple years from now or whenever, and they're really heavily relating to what you're saying. Can you speak to them? What advice, and I know that you're still figuring it out, but what advice do you have for such people so that they don't get to the point where you are at, maybe even, or if they are already at that point, like what do they do now? But so speak to like both. How do you avoid this? Being in the position that you were at, like how could you have avoided that? Is there even any way? Like if you don't understand love, then is there any way for you to be able to figure out how to? And if you don't have the answer, then that's also cool. But I just want you to give advice to the people who are in your position, just in case.
A piece of advice I would give is let it in. Just try to let it in without trying to protect yourself first. Do not be a porcupine hedgehog your entire life, poking people with your needles. It's hard to hug a cactus, and so don't be a cactus. And it's hard because when you grow up in a traumatic circumstance, you interpret neutral cues as negative cues. And what that can cause is an innate prickliness because it's very easy to want to distance yourself because my defense mechanism is distance. I don't hurt people actively because I'm very tactful. I'm an extremely tactful person. I've always been that way. But I am also a distant person too. And that's because I lose faith in relationships real quickly. I see, married couples all the time. Sometimes they're unhappy as I was growing up, and just relationships failing all around me. And so I have this innate belief that, all right, people can care a lot for you at a point in time, but that can dwindle and they don't even know, and they have the best of intentions. It's like when you tell your wife, I'll love you even when you're fat. And then they get fat. And then you're like, actually, I don't love you as much as I used to. I thought I would love you, but now I can't. So I have a paranoia with people's words they don't know how that'll affect 10 years from now. They don't make accurate projections just because it's hard to project how much you'll love the person in 20 years. And so that makes me take relationship commitment loosely when I don't want to. I want to be more invested into my relationships and be less detached because I can see the fatalistic ending of things very easily. I'm a good red flag spotter. And typically people who have distance in their relationships are good red flag spotters. And they're just noticing, oh, that could potentially be a red flag. And they're just distancing themselves quickly ahead of time before the red flag becomes a reality. So I would say to people who are really, really keen on red flags to give things a shot, even if you know that red flags exist. Because even if it doesn't work out, you still learn something. And you learn something about yourself from letting yourself be transformed by something outside of you. And it is scary and it is vulnerable. And it'll show you how much you still have room for openness. I don't know how to explain it. There, you can already think you're open, but it's not until you allow yourself to try to go beyond your barriers how far you've been closing yourself off. It's kind of like someone who has bad eyesight doesn't know that they have bad eyesight until they go to an optometrist and they use that machine and you're like, oh, I actually can't see shit. Sorry, I've been swearing a lot. I've been having just a
Hey, it's all
really
right. It's all good.
I've been having a
Speak as you free. Speak as you freely like.
I've been having a really raw past few months because I've been trying to figure out my Enneagram type, and I'll probably like I'm going between two types. I'm always probably going to be going between these two types, like sexual 9 or self-preservation 6 with sexual up really close to it in some way. And I just can't make up my mind because when you have PTSD, you always look like you have 6 in your Enneagram code, and I can't separate PTSD from me anymore, and so I can't tell what is my Enneagram type and what is trauma.
Fair.
And so while I was doing Enneagram work, I had to write down each year of my life and every major milestone from every year. And it just brought me to tears to have to talk about my entire life. Because one, I don't focus on myself enough to realize just how much things have impacted me. And two, it brings you to tears when you kind of see your whole life in front of you
Mm,
and you have to look at it honestly. It's almost like an alcoholic that realizes how many kids' events that they've missed because they were drunk during their kids' birthdays or their weddings. It hurts because you see all of your most important life events and you get to see just the spectrum of everything there. And so I've been really raw and emotional these past months, and it's a very confusing experience, but it's good because it's like a kid who didn't know they couldn't see well until they went to get glasses and they realize how clear their eyesight looks in the glasses and they realize how much they've been missing out on how things look, but they just didn't know. I feel the same about openness in relationships. Sometimes you don't realize how closed off you are until you open yourself up. Yeah. So,
Joyce. Oh,
oh,
I wish I could just hold your hand. But yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I think that number one, you're very brave for all of what you've shared today and for trying to help people. You're always trying to help people, and you've grown so much as a content creator. You went from someone who almost never talked about herself, especially publicly and even privately, to like now being more open to sharing yourself, and being more readily ready when I'm like, so Joyce, what do you think about this? And I see where you're growing with that. It's an honor to be your friend for what it's worth, and I feel like it's not too late. It's not too late. Like it's good that you were able to look back as the metaphorical alcoholic and see like, okay, wow, like this is how much that I've really missed out on, or how much that has really like happened to me and whatnot. But at the same time, now you have those glasses on, not only so that you can see your past, but also so that you can more correctly see your future and where you're headed to. And just so you know, I'm right there with you.
oh, thanks, Denzel. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's almost like looking at you lighting up like lighting up a lot of houses on fire, and you can say like the houses are whatever your relationships or achievements or things in your life that were going great, but you felt like the most calming sensation to you was watching something burn because you were so used to seeing things burn that
Mm,
it feels very irregular and almost wrong to see something go well,
mm,
and that's a really tough sensation that you realize that there's for me there was a discomfort with seeing things go well because
mm,
I couldn't believe it almost seemed too good to be true. And
mm,
so doing a lot of inner work made me realize like my urge to set houses on fire, and
mm,
I don't want to do that because it keeps me safe. If the house is on fire and it's gone, I don't have to look after it anymore. Or maybe there's so much wrapped up in it. Um, like if you set a garden on fire, but you have rationalized to yourself that the garden was never going to bear fruit anyway. It's because
mm,
it's like you then go back and you realize, was the garden not bearing fruit because I didn't put it in the right soil?
mm,
And so I'm just the one also responsible for it not working. So I just have an indifference to things because I refuse to commit to things that I think will fail, but they're gonna fail if I don't even commit to them. So it's like when you look back on your past and you realize all the things you set up for failure just because you came in with limiting beliefs about it, then you realize, wow, you really have to get yourself in check. It is someone becoming sober, but not of the alcohol. It's becoming sober of the mind and
mm.
trying to free up all of these negative, limiting, traumatic beliefs you have so you can stop sabotaging your life in small or big ways. That's what self care is. It's not sabotaging your life in small or big ways. And we don't realize when we're doing it sometimes because it can feel like every day.
For sure. I think you've said a lot that's in a good way. Like you've said everything that's probably needed to be said. And I think the final thing that I guess I'll put like a bow on it is once again with the oversharing. To be so now we've talked a lot about like when you're undersharing. Also be careful when you're oversharing and trying to force dynamics too much by kind of like what I was saying earlier, like when you're like, no, I know that this is going to work. I see so much potential here. So let me start, doing this. Let me start doing that. And it's just like, no, like allow the dynamic to breathe for a bit and allow it to progress. Give the other person a chance to catch up and also start to give in their energy because once again, it has to be a two-way street. So be careful with when you are oversharing and over focused on the growth of your relationship with someone, and rather just allow things to like grow naturally. I think that's just a big thing to keep in mind. And then lastly, I wanted to also say that actually either I forgot the other thing I was going to say, or that was pretty much about it. Did you have any final thoughts, Joyce?
Yeah, sometimes oversharing can be a form of overcompensation. So it's almost like there's a desperation for connection. And so sometimes to meet
Mm,
that need, sometimes we'll overshare. So it's a symptom of a void. So if
mhm,
you're oversharing, it's interesting to look at maybe the voids that exist within you.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's an INFJ talking, y'all. No, but seriously, that's very much true, and I feel like that was definitely what was happening with me. Like just like what I said, every waking day, every waking second, I want to spend it in intimacy. That's if it were up to me at least. And once again, especially as a nine and as an ENFJ, I had to learn and work on finding that intimacy with myself so that way that even rather than just always seeking it with other people when I don't have other people around or the people around me are subpar, which I run into a lot of people like that. Not that they are subpar objectively, but subpar as in like not what I'm looking for, not the type of seeds or plants that I want in my garden. Then rather than watering them, how about I focus on continuing to find ways to get my own water? And so getting to better know myself and all of that. And then that'll even help me to show up even more in my dynamics with being able to share and bring substance into those dynamics. So hopefully, you guys have been able to learn a lot from this. And don't forget that Joyce and I offer coaching. So check out the description below, email us and everything. If you would like coaching from us on any of this, be sure to comment, leave questions, comments, concerns. Share the video if you feel like this will be helpful to other people. And yeah, thanks for watching today. And until next time, stay
Stay
sharp.
sharp.
また夜が